Have you ever discounted advice based on the source of the advice or who gave you the piece of advice, only to think later, I wish I had listened? Well, if that's you, then this video is for you, because I'm going to give you one habit that you can apply to your life so that nobody ever says, "I told you so," again. And I'll be honest, it is easy to discount information based on the source of the information as opposed to the information itself. I remember my wife was giving me some advice based on a challenge that I'd brought to her. And I don't actually remember doing this, but apparently in the moment I ignored her. And then I went away and I sought some advice from someone who I trusted and respected. And then I came back to her a couple of days later. I was like, "Babe, you're never gonna believe this piece of advice that I got." She looked me in the eyes and she said, "You only listen to people who you think are worthy of offering you advice." And that kind of hit me hard because I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And she's like, "I literally gave you that same piece of advice a couple of days ago. But because it wasn't from the source that you thought it needed to be from, you discounted the information." Now, apart from demonstrating how much of a bonehead I am, this kind of also highlights the fact that we all have the ability to become our own worst enemy. If you haven't checked out the last couple of videos that we released, click somewhere around here and you can find out some other habits that will help you stop becoming your own worst enemy. In this episode though, we're going to look at this habit that will help you not become your own worst enemy by paying attention to the voices of wisdom around you. I don't know if you've observed this, but everyone who became their own worst enemy at one point or another was warned. Someone pointed it out. Someone said, "Hey, you shouldn't date him. You shouldn't go out with her. I don't know if you should really take out that loan," but they ignored it. And so here's something that's true for all of us, regardless of where we sit on faith, is that our worst decisions are always preceded by a series of unwise decisions. And I know you might have a little bit of resistance to that, and it's always uncomfortable to come face to face with that idea. So I want to share a story with you that might soften some of your resistance to that. This narrative is found in the Hebrew Bible. In fact, it's found specifically in 1 Kings 12. Now, if you have no idea about what the Hebrew Bible is, it's kind of the story of the nation of Israel. And to give you a little bit of context, this narrative we're going to look at focuses around Israel's 4th king. Israel had had a number of kings up until this point. There was Saul, then there was David, then there was Solomon. Oh my goodness, did I get that right? There was Saul, and then there was David, and then there was Solomon. And Solomon had a son called Rehoboam. And Rehoboam wasn't king yet, but he was about to take over the mantle. And the narrative focuses on Rehoboam and someone who has a very similar name, Jeroboam. And so Jeroboam is actually a leader in King Solomon's army. He actually oversees a workforce of over 150,000 people. He's this incredible leader. And then one day, Jeroboam is out for a walk and a prophet comes up to him and pretty much tells him, "Hey, the nation of Israel is going to split in two. Israel was made up of 12 tribes, and he said, hey, 10 of the tribes are eventually going to go with you, and 2 of the tribes are going to go with Solomon's son, Rehoboam." Now, the problem was Jeroboam didn't keep this news to himself. In fact, he went around telling people about it. And as you can imagine, Solomon got wind of it, and Solomon got quite angry about it. He tried to assassinate Jeroboam, and so Jeroboam fled. And then time passes and Solomon dies. And Jeroboam comes back to see Rehoboam be initiated as king. And there's a conversation that takes place between the leaders of Israel and Rehoboam and his advisors. And everyone kind of comes to Rehoboam and says, "Hey, your father was incredibly harsh. He worked us to the bone. And here's what we'll do. We will promise to follow you and be loyal to you if you lessen some of the restrictions." And Rehoboam does an incredibly wise thing. He goes to his father's counselors and seeks wisdom from them. And effectively what happens is his counselors say, "Hey, you should listen to the people." And then Rehoboam does something incredibly unwise. He goes to his friends who he'd grown up with and he said, "Hey, what do you think I should do?" Now, the other challenging part of this story is that Rehoboam's friends were on his payroll. He was literally paying for his posse to hang out with him and give him advice. And they said, "Well, what you should do is you should tighten the restrictions. You should demand loyalty." And so Rehoboam goes back to the people and he says, "Effectively, you thought my father was tough. I am going to be far, far tougher." And a revolt happens. The nation of Israel splits. 2 of the tribes follow Rehoboam, and 10 of the tribes follow Jeroboam. All because one man didn't listen to the wise voices around him. And the truth is, Rehoboam's decision was entirely preventable. He had people who gave him advice. It was what he needed to hear. It just wasn't what he wanted to hear. So let me ask you a question. Is there any advice in your life that you are currently ignoring? Indiana Jones. The headwind. The reality is, when we ignore the voices around us, we can become just like Rehoboam. See, Rehoboam had the potential to not become his own worst enemy. He just completely ignored it. So what are you ignoring in your life right now? Is there a piece of advice around a job or a relationship? Is there a piece of advice around finances that you're ignoring? Here's what I challenge you to do. Get someone who's wiser, not your friend, not someone who has a vested interest in your life, and ask them this simple question. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Now, I know that some of you are going to say, hey Chris, here's the reality. It's none of their business. And you're right, it is none of their business. But the way that we stop becoming our own worst enemy is to invite people into our business, to ask them, to say, hey, what would you do if you were in my shoes? Because you know as well as I do that private decisions eventually become public and unwise decisions spill over into our lives. So if you don't want to become your own worst enemy, be wise. Invite someone into your business because somebody can see what you can't. When you listen to the wisdom around you, wise voices set you up for wise choices and prevent you and prevent me from becoming our own worst enemy. If you found this content helpful and you want to explore more, why not click the link below this video to check out our Beyond the Message podcast. And if you've hung around to the end of this video, why don't you comment what I'm trying to make? Because I don't know. I've got no idea.